Okay. So this is just like, can you hear me? This is just like an update to that old best asses in adult history thing, and I got um, I got ready footage, um, but I'm trying to decide because like going into research for this thing, I mean I was going into it with already like established stuff, even with the preview. Um, but I'm like trying to decide like with the amount of information I want to put into this thing. Um, and with um, I'm trying to think like, should I separate this thing? Should I put it all at once? Should I begin separating it, but then like put it together? Because there's so many, I mean, not not a ton amount, but like there's a lot of trinkets in it, because I go into this stuff and I just go, but then there's also other things that kind of goes into it. So, but I was looking at, I was like, whoa, shit, you know what? I should probably put out something because. This isn't. It's fun. It's a lot of fun to do. I guess I didn't realize just how much of it was gonna, uh, just in terms of scheduling. How much schedule it was going to feel, but also how like there was other things I have to do and stuff. So it's like, all right. But I put that preview. Um, So I think of it like that's like a teaser trailer preview. We'll do it this way, and this is like the second trailer. It's like the second preview because I put something together specifically for the preview. Pretty much all the footage I've shown. I'm deciding if to keep it in or to just kind of update all of it. Um, like there's footage of just me talking. Like what I'm doing is I'm making a whole bunch of segments. I'm just kind of putting it together. And so there is a bit of there hopefully is a good smoothness to it, but I don't know if that's as important. I think each part. Because each person that I'm representing, and this is something I'm going to bring up, each one of these people are significant in their own way. I mean, these people, the four people I got on that Mount Rushmore, are so significant to their own selves that each one, um, it plays on something that we see in human psychology. But each player, each performer, um, each icon are significant in their own way. In the field of the adult industry, and so it's easy to kind of make these things separation, but there is a through line. There's a reason why this happened, and it's a representative that we can see in all of human psychology. So I really want that to be emphasized. So as far as the smoothness, I mean, this is why I mean, like, I don't know if it's really as important to put this all in one together. You'll see. But for at this moment in space, it's not complete. Really, it's like I have a bunch of stuff. Not a bunch, but just I have things um, recorded, but it's just simply not ready. Like I'm not ready to put that stuff out there. But I can put out something, and so I put out like for myself. Like I have like what do they call it? You have the A roll. I don't know what they call it that. I know they call it B roll, but we'll call it B roll. Basically, a bunch of footage of me just kind of putting. This is why they're not going to be the final product. It's me kind of putting out ideas and then kind of stringing it from other ideas and then putting it together. So I don't know if this is going to be in the final cut, but this is going to be. We'll call this like a special shot preview for this. So my next segment is basically me talking about um, psychology, specifically when it comes to evolutionary psychology and their involvement in the research of buttocks, specifically with female buttocks. Now, keep in mind, this is just like rough draft, so I'm just talking out my ass at the camera, so you guys. But it's basically just like my thoughts mixed with my thoughts about evolution psychology, um, when we're talking about sex in general. And so maybe you'll start seeing a little bit of that in the final product. But for this point, here you go. Hopefully, enjoy. So as we're continuing on in the history of the Bucks, let's go ahead and I'm just gonna make it real simple. Okay, I'm gonna just read the Wikipedia page and then discuss further. Sexualization of the Bucks, especially of the female gender, as it occurred throughout history. Okay, all right. So this is just a version, on the Wikipedia page, me recording. So because these things tend to update, not specifically with Wikipedia, but just history in general. So just FYI. Sexologist Alfred Kinsley, and I've read this before. I'm just kind of reading through. Suggests that the bucks is the primary sexual representation site in primates. Okay, that makes sense, right? Um, some anthropologists and sociobiologists believe that breast fetishism derives from the breasts looking similar to the bucks, but instead provides sexual attraction from the front of the body. Okay. Okay. So before we continue on, reading through this thing, it's very simple. It's like complicatingly simple. Um, Reading this and also going through some of their sites that they kind of reference here, I noticed that there's a lot, but there's also a little. There's probably a lot more arts and more cultural kind of significance of the bucks. As far as there being that much of a research, I mean, yes and no. There's a lot of broad spectrum strokes of what we suggest seems to be the significance of the bucks based on other primates, us as a primate ourselves, but there's also a lot of extrapolations in it, especially in the language. The direction, and this is something that seems to be really consistent with, especially evolutionary psychology, especially when it comes to evolutionary psychology. The direction always seems to be great. The language seems to be it's either too it extrapolates a little too much, even if it seems simple to you. It tends to. I'll give an example of this. Okay, so we'll get to it. Okay, so evolutionary psychologists suggest that the rounded buttocks may have evolved as a desirable trait because they provide a visual indication of a woman's youth and fertility. That sounds correct. Like it's very straightforward. If you're reading this, this sounds great, right? And this goes alongside with a lot of other things you find in evolution. The language seems to be off. And I'll say this. The only argument I would make is I don't know if it's as true about youth. I think that word is thrown out a lot in psychology more than I think it should. The truth is, I think the word health is much more objective. It is actually a little bit more accurate. Because the reality is that I don't know if people are as interested in youth as they are in health. It's just that those things tend to be around the same tempo, just not necessarily. There are plenty of people that aren't necessarily like I don't think humans are as interested in youth as people suggest, like in psychology. I think a lot of it is that psychology gets its rep from evolutionary psych science in general. It's just that when we're coming to these conclusions, it's more of a extrapolation. Even the word youth, it's an insinuation, but it's broad enough where people can go because you think youth, you think health. But generally speaking, based on the behavior of humans, it would suggest that it's more that humans go for health, not youth. Youth is just an indication of health. But health in itself is enough for a human to be interested in a woman or male. As long as something looks healthy, humans will have very little issue with that thing. You also have to take into effect cultural differentials, like there might be a lot of appraisal toward youth, especially when it comes to capabilities. However, humans are more likely interested in something like health than they ever were. In fact, humans tend to gravitate toward healthy looking things than they ever would necessarily with youth. I can promise you, if something looks healthy, humans would go for it. If it being health or like youth, sure, I guess, but because we have so many complicated arenas when it comes to, especially when it comes to consent and attraction in terms of what's sanctionable, I would vote that it's mostly that youth seems to be the case. As long as something looks healthy, youth. As long as something looks healthy, then we tend to go for it. I know that seems like, well, that doesn't that go hand to hand? Yes and no. Um, Youth has always been used as an extrapolation. It's an extrapolation word that you find in science. It's not really an accurate word because that's not necessarily the case. I just wish that scientists, especially in psychology, use a little bit more broad terms that indicate more of an objective direction. Because as you kind of move forward through a lot of this stuff, it tends to get a little bit more muddled because things kind of collide. I mean, yes, there is a optimal, like an there is a an optimized aspect to the healthy sort of aspect of the to the buttocks, and that is usually an indication of youth, kind of. I mean, I don't know. When I think of a nice buttocks, I don't know if I always go to youth. I always just go to health. In fact, I think while it's usually an indication, because when you think about, and they bring it up, that as certain things decrease, like the midnights, it tends to decrease as the body gets less healthy. And again, less healthy, not necessarily less like youthful, just less healthy, uh, because it's just more accurate. And it's less about an extrapolation of why something is happening. Because like the reason why you're attracted to a box is because it looks good for some reason. That's the reason why you like it. It's not because you're looking at something and you're going, well, this will make a great bait and the pelvis is wide enough. No, there's a ghost behind the machine. There's a reason why you will like the things you like, but it's not that simple. I mean, things get a little bit more muddled, even with other creatures. It's not even that damn simple with other animals. With other animals, including insects, it can get pretty complicated. It's not that simple. Um, I just think when it comes to the field of psychology, especially when it comes to psychology that deals with biology, I think less extrapolation needs to occur because if there are more accumulating answers, that's why I really like the emphasis on like often or maybe or kind of if you're gonna make some sort of extrapolations. Because I'm gonna tell you right now, reading this thing, it's just like a field of extrapolations based on a few psychologists. They don't really have they have reputable psychologists, scientists in general, but it's more like a mix of quotes and like there's not too much on it. And even looking at the references, and I looked through some of that, it's there, but it's also like a bunch of just it's more of like a fascination with a very relatively simple thing and trying that just became so huge. Again, this is why I brought up culture. Culture has a huge impact on why bucks are looked at. And the reason why I'm bringing this up because and they brought this up a little bit, which is the suggestion of why breasts are has some kind of a fetishization, especially hugely in culture, is because it's derived from the bugs being so similar to the which is again a suggestion. Is not necessarily that simple because when you're done reading this shit, and I read this thing like 10 different occasions, just always just going through this bitch. In one session, I think I read this thing at least like 3 different things, and going through the rabbit hole, you kind of find that a lot of the stuff in the extrapolations you're making, it's just a bunch of suggestions, and you're mostly going to find this stuff in psychology. As far as evolutionary biology, they'll suggest stuff, but they'll find that it's like what they suggest is more technical, but they suggest that you look at the more psychology of it because it's much more complicated. And when you look at the psychology of it, it tends to just be muddled with a bunch of extrapolations. Now, the reason I bring this up is because, well, my next point.